going to medical school to study physiotherapy or physical therapy. Some universities call it physical therapy, for a duration of 5 years. And right after, I transitioned into a master's degree where I pursued kinesiology, and currently I'm doing my PhD at the University of Toronto, also in kinesiology.
Thank you. You kind of touched on your PhD work and all of those things. So we're going to come back to that. Mm-hmm. And, in all of these achievements, I mean, I'm trying to understand, were you born with a golden spoon? I know when younger ones look at you, they see success. Mm-hmm. I do understand that behind this success, there are years of hard work and commitments and, all of those things. Could you share with me what your growing up was like?
Thanks for that question. Growing up, definitely was not born with the silver spoon. But I would say my parents were people who knew what they wanted, that they wanted their kids to have a bright future. And so I definitely have to give them their flowers here. They did a lot. Even though they had little, they did their best to provide us with the basics. And by the basics, I mean at least food, shelter, and some clothes on our back. And I also recognize that even though I call this the basics, not everybody has access to this. And I definitely recognize that, I would say privilege, considering that I grew up in Nigeria. And I know, again, that not everyone has access to that. Growing up, I went to a community, well, not community, but a private school within my community. But that does not mean it was a big school. It was one of those very humble private schools.
Yeah.
And right after, I went to a missionary secondary school, St. Francis Catholic Secondary School, Idimu. So if anybody from there ever finds this video, shout out to you guys.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes. So I went to St. Francis, and I would say that St. Francis definitely contributed to who I am today because of some of the values that they try to instill in the students. And one of I believe it's their motto currently, it's called Magis in Love and Service. And basically they tell us, or tell their students, to always strive to become the best. That was the take-home message for everyone who attended that school. And I really appreciate that message because over the course of my professional journey, I still think about that motto, and I still think about how I can continue to strive in love and service. And in love and service means to your community, to the people around you. How can you be better? And not just for yourself, like I said, how can I impact the community that I find myself in a positive way? Leaving St. Francis, I moved on to Unilag, which is where I did my physio degree. But
great
it wasn't,
Akokites.
Yes, great. So all the Akokites in the building, say hi. I'm kidding. But yes, during the process of gaining admission, I did write the post-jam for LASU and also for Unilag. And I applied for medicine and surgery, actually, at both institutions. But while going through the process, I had come across a post or something, I think somewhere, I don't know, about physiotherapists. And I started looking into that and realized that, honestly, maybe I don't want to be a medical doctor. I also shadowed some doctors just to see how they lived their life. And I realized that maybe truly that was... and I do give the doctors their flowers, but I know that it's a lot of demand, and I thought that I would really want a work-life balance, which wasn't something I saw then. And that might have been a very myopic view that I also recognized that I could have maybe looked at other aspects of medicine, not just surgery. And that kind of discouraged me from going ahead. I did gain admission to medicine and surgery actually too, at LASUT, but decided to go for physiotherapy later at Unilag, which is what I did. And still in the spirit of Magis in Love and Service, I graduated as the best graduating student in my class and the best clinical student, I guess, in the department that year, which was very, very encouraging. And I would say it was a wonderful feeling, and it wasn't easy. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It was a lot of sacrifice, a lot of self-discovery, and a lot of intentional, what's the word here? Maybe just, I would say sacrifice, essentially. So when others were maybe going to parties, I'm going to the library. When others were sleeping, I had to wake up a bit earlier to just get to class early so I can sit in front, because we know that most of these classes are overpopulated, and if you don't get there early, you're going to stand at the back and you might not hear the lecturer and all of that. But overall, it was a good journey, I would say, and it also definitely had its own positive impacts on me. Leaving Unilag, I worked at, I did my NYC at Remo Stars Football Club, Ogun State, and that was also a very wonderful experience. I also did my internship before that NYC at FMC Abeokuta. And that was also a wonderful experience, because now I left the Lagos State, which was it's a metropolitan city.
Busy.
Yeah. And now I had to work in the Ogun State community. And I think that was a very unique experience, because I was used to seeing people in Lagos who were a bit more enlightened about their health. And that was not the case at Abeokuta. I needed to explain a lot more to people why they needed to take their health more seriously. I would say the level of information at Abeokuta was not as high as Lagos State, but it was a wonderful experience overall. And then it was during all of those that I considered doing a master's degree. And even before that point, during my undergrad at Unilag, I had done a research experience, which was actually what I'm continuing in my PhD, and it was looking at how music influenced movement after a stroke.
Yeah.
And that's exactly in a higher level what I'm doing in my PhD. And what I found during that research was what influenced my decision to go for a master's and a PhD. Basically, I realized that people who had music, when they had their therapy sessions, tended to have a better physical outcome.
Yeah.
And I use the word tended because it was an undergraduate research, and the experiment was not powered enough, so we did not reach significance. However, we were trending towards significance.
Yeah.
But
I think we're going to come to
research.
That. Yeah. So listening to you, to be honest, that was quite inspirational. Very, very inspirational. And, in all of these achievements that you've just reeled out, how do they make you feel today?
I feel grateful, one. And I feel, honestly, other than grateful, really, I'm happy to be able to contribute to the world in a better, or contribute to improve the world. That's the word. Basically, being empowered to serve better. So back to Magis in Love and Service, because all of the experience and knowledge that I have has equipped me to become someone who is more knowledgeable about rehabilitation, and I can help people in the world of rehabilitation better just because of this experience and the knowledge that I've gathered throughout my post-secondary education up till this point. So,
yeah. Okay, so you almost touched on this, but I just want to refresh on that. After your undergraduate studies at University of Lagos, like you mentioned, at what point did you think it was necessary to get more education abroad?
I believe that's really, like, the seed really got sown in me during my internship, during my neuro rehab rotation. So there is the internship process, you have to work in different departments in the hospital. And so when I was in the departments that worked or that treated people with stroke, I did feel a little bit helpless, because if you look at what stroke is, it's a life-altering disease or occurrence that, if not managed well, can completely change the trajectory of your life. And that was something that really made me I wanted to be able to contribute to help people get back to as close as a normal life as they can. And that's kind of where I started looking at what is something that people can easily access without spending a whole lot of money, but will also positively influence their outcome in rehabilitation. And the answer was not far-fetched. Music, like, you don't need to spend an extra kobo. Just turn on the radio. Many of us have a phone now that we can play music on. If you don't have a phone, you can just go into the mall. There's music. Just go somewhere. I feel like it's very accessible. If you wanted music, you can easily access it without spending too much or anything at all. And that's kind of what really made me want to go for further studies.
Education, yeah.
And then I looked around me. The kind of questions I had, honestly, I could not answer it in the space that I was. And that was what made me look outside of my immediate space, which was the Nigerian community. I mean, Nigeria then. So, yeah.
Interesting. So, master's in kinesiology from University of Manitoba,
Yes.
and currently PhD student, University of Toronto.
Yes.
I want us to talk about your research area right now. But before we get to that, just briefly, to an Abiola listening to you, Nkechi and Musa, who probably want to come for their master's or PhD, just on a very high level, how can they, go through being successful? And then we can quickly get to what you're doing.
A few tips for people who want to go into a master's degree program. First of all, have an idea of the kind of research questions that you're interested in answering. You don't need to know everything. You just need to have an idea of what you want to know. And once you have that, another thing I would say, especially if you're still in your undergrad program, is try to finish with the best grade possible, because that would positively and exponentially improve your chances of getting into a master's degree program, because it's very competitive. So try your best to finish very well. At least, worst case scenario, a 2-1. A first class should be the goal.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Okay, now, so let's get into the PhD research interest area. So to a layman,
yes,
what exactly are you working on, and what does that entail?
Okay. I believe I don't have to define music. Hopefully people know what music is. Something you listen to that has rhythm, and you can hopefully move your body to, not necessarily, if you don't know how to dance, it's okay. So far you can nod your head, do something to a sound that has rhythm. That's music. So what I'm looking at is, how does music influence the way that we move? So ordinarily, if I were, for example, I don't know, washing plates, right? I'm washing some plates. without music versus if I were listening to music. You might think, oh, I'm still watching the play the same way. Actually, you might not be, because research is beginning to show that we might be doing that same action with different movement strategies. And by movement is basically how your hands move or how your legs move during this task. And we noticed that, and specifically my research is looking at how this would improve stroke outcomes, right? After a stroke, typically, first of all, what is a stroke? Let's go back there. Yeah. A stroke is something that occurs in the brain. So when there is an injury, for example, there's a blood burst. So the vessels, the pipes that carry blood to the brain, sometimes it could either be blocked. Okay. If it's blocked, then blood cannot get to some parts of the brain, and those parts of the brain begin to die. Or there is a burst in that pipe. So the vessels, I'm going to call it pipe for the layman. If it bursts, the blood spills in the brain matter, and that would also make the part of the brain where the blood touches to die. And once that happens, the brain is it's like a machine. Every part of this machine has work that is supposed to be doing. And so once there is an injury, like the blockage or the burst where some cells die, the things that those parts of the brain are supposed to be doing will no longer work. And for the most part, if, for example, this blood burst or this blockage is on the left side of the brain, the right side of the body is where you see some weakness or paralysis. And by paralysis, it means you will not be able to use, like the way I'm raising my hand, you won't be able to use it as much actively, left or right. And depending on where that happens to, it can affect your speech. You might not be able to talk. If it affects the front side of the brain, it does have an increased effect on even the way you think. So you might be more emotional, you might be irrational, you might be depression. So that's another big thing, and that's one part that music has been extensively studied to improve. And even if it doesn't really affect the frontal, which is the front side of the brain, a stroke most times comes with depressive symptoms, because someone who was able to walk, talk, run, all of a sudden they can't do that. Obviously, they begin to feel bad with time and all of that. And so music has been shown to improve those outcomes. And when your mood, your arousal is improved, even the way you want to engage in a task also becomes a lot better.
And is it because we have this is me speaking from a layman's perspective. The arteries carry blood outside the heart. Is it because there is no supply of this blood that is making that part of the body, I would say, not active anymore?
No.
Okay, what exactly?
So, like I said, the brain, without the brain, if the brain shuts down, we're dead. Even if the heart is working, even if every other part of your body is working, once the brain shuts off, the heart would shut off too. Even if it's fine, every other part of the body will be. The brain, and that's why they say I want to go to like the head of the family, the head. Yeah. Without the head, the body is gone. It won't work.
Absolutely.
And so the brain, once a part is injured, doesn't matter if everything is fine. It's not going to work. It's done. And so what rehabilitation tries to do is, especially if you start early, and that's why early intervention is very important. In Canada, if you can catch the stroke, I believe within the first 2 hours, it's possible to reverse it. There's a high chance of reversing it, that you might not get any of those bad things, because the brain cells can easily be saved. Like, okay, if we catch this quickly, we can save the brain before it dies. Okay. But if you don't catch it early, which is, if you don't know the signs, which I will get to, of a stroke, and you should know the signs, so that you can catch it early. If you don't know the signs and the damage is done, then there is with rehabilitation, we can save some part of the brain. And not, I want to be careful with my words here. We can open certain parts of the brain to take over some of the function of the parts that we lost. And so, for example, let's say we have the scalp as the brain, and I mean, maybe not the scalp, but a ball or something. And we lose, let's say, this section, and this section was responsible for maybe you writing and being able to carry a cup. We can say, okay, since we've lost here, this part, we can maybe start teaching you to do something so that this other part that we didn't
mimic it.
Will start learning to take over the role of the part that we've lost. And if you start your rehab early, we can easily train the brain. Like the brain goes back to like a child. You can train a lot of things there. However, once some period of time has gone by, it gets harder to retrain the brain, because now the brain is used to just having that injured part. And the other parts have kind of like, well, we don't need to do anything. But with rehab, early rehab especially, we can start training like, okay, listen, this is done. We need to move on. And other parts of the brain need to start taking up some of the actions and start relearning some of the things that this side of the brain that is injured can no longer do, which is interesting, and it's called brain plasticity. Just want to use the right term. So if people want to read up on brain plasticity, you can do that too.
Interesting. So before we get to, I know you talked about like science. I just want us to look at what causes stroke, and then the science, and then come into how the music could help. I got something very important, that early detection is very important. It increases the chances that this could be reversed. So, talk me through the causes and then the science, and then we get to how this could,
So, strokes can be caused by numerous things, but one of the biggest indicator or something that you need to watch out for is hypertension. And what is hypertension? High blood pressure. We always advise people, especially people over the age of 40, please check your blood pressure at least once a month. Try, and you might need to go to a pharmacist, a clinic, if you can. And you can buy a blood pressure machine at home. Nowadays, it's not as expensive. Honestly, especially people who know how to finesse the internet, AliExpress even sells blood pressure machine for cheap. You can buy it, and it works. Honest, I've seen some of these machines that work. So you don't have to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars or naira. If you go to Mushin, for people in Lagos, there are shops that sell it for pretty cheap there. So get a blood pressure machine and check at least once a month. People over 40. Younger people too, please check. Hypertension is also prevalent in the young people. Not only old people have stroke, even children have stroke. Now, like I said, high blood pressure is one of the biggest concerns. High cholesterol level, so high fat in the bloodstream, those pipes that I talked about, can also, like I said, blockage, fats. So if it closes up, you've increased your chance of a stroke or a heart attack. So either of those two. Those are like the major things. Other things that can cause a stroke is, some of the things could be cancer. People who have...
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like different types of cancers could trigger a stroke.
Interesting.
People that also... Oh, another thing, even pregnancy. Sometimes. So when you're pregnant, that's part of the reasons you need to go for your antenatal, so they can check your blood pressure and check to see that you are not a high risk, you're not in a high risk condition for a stroke. So please take your health seriously and lower your salt intake, because salt also increases your chances of high blood pressure based on research. But those are like the major things to look out for. Overall, get a checkup, a health checkup at least once a year, especially people who are older than 40. It does help. The general checkup, kidney, liver, all of that, because who knows, the earlier you you can prevent even getting to a stroke, the better. Prevention, they say, is always better than cure.
Absolutely. It's interesting, you mentioned that cancer also causes stroke. That's interesting to know. Coming to the science you mentioned, so we have a good understanding on what causes it, even though I think this is so interesting that I'm thinking I would like to engage you on some other day to kind of get into some of these weeds. So let's talk about the science that you mentioned previously.
Yes. So there is an acronym, and I'm trying to remember, but I think it's called FAST. FAST. F means face.
Okay.
So for example, as we're having a conversation currently, you notice that my face is going to the left. Like I'm talking to you now, but you realize, oh wait, something's going on. Like it's like my face is drooping, and it happens. If you look at videos of people that have had to, because sometimes there are videos that have caught it, you would see it happen. The face suddenly just starts dropping.
Okay.
One side just starts going down, or you see that they're slurring their speech, right? Like it's like they were talking fine when suddenly they're not talking fine. It looks like they put water in their mouth. So you're like, okay, what's going on? So fast face. A is arm. So when you notice the face is the easiest to catch. Once you notice that the face is drooping, you want to ask the person to raise their hands. Just tell them, raise your hand up, the two hands. And typically one hand goes higher than the other. You're like, raise it highest. It's always kind of like, so that's a second sign. S is, I already talked about S. Speech is like slurring of the speech. And the T is, I can't really remember what the T is now. But when I remember, I'll bring it up again. But I believe the T is time. Like it's time to call 911 in North America. Yeah. If you were in Nigeria, it's time to rush them to the emergency.
Yeah.
Once you know, the person might tell you, listen, I'm fine. They might be arguing with you, but no, once you notice that there's a drooping face, there's weakness in the arms, and there's slurred speech, it's time to go. It's time to call 911. And you have to, if you're in North America, you need to tell them what you saw. Like, hey, it's classic sign of stroke, because that also makes the paramedics, there are certain things, like you save time for them too when they arrive at the location to get the person to a stroke center or hospital real quickly. And at the hospital, they know what to do depending on the type of stroke that the person is presenting with. Although I mentioned there's blockage and burst, so there's the hemorrhagic or the ischemic type. So those are the two types. Those are things for the doctors to worry about. You don't have to worry about those. Yeah. But yes, those are things you should look out for.
Interesting. So the other thing I wanted us to look at is you talked about like connecting what you're doing and how that helps. Again, the key to that is early detection. So I want you to, sort of come in, from that perspective of what you're doing, how that will help a stroke patient to recover.
Yes. So like I previously mentioned, early detection is very important, at least especially to save the person and also try to reverse. If it's detected very, very early, you might not even spend too much time with physio because the brain cells are saved, so they don't even die. You don't lose as much brain cells. So I have seen people who walk out and you can't even tell, like this person suffered a stroke. However, in cases, especially back home, sometimes it's not as easy to detect very quickly. And even when it's detected early, the time to get tests done and all of those sometimes takes, you might not be able to reverse some of the damages as quickly. But if you start rehab quickly, and by starting quickly, once the person is stable enough to start rehabilitation, typically within the first week of the stroke, we have seen that at that stage, a lot of people, even though depending on the person, but many times they don't still want to engage with outside because it's very fresh, right? They're still trying to understand what just happened to them. And that's where one of the places music can come in. You're already, like, many of those people already feel down. The physio is talking to them and they're like, I don't want to listen. And physios too engage music. Just like, okay, what kind of thing does this person like to listen to? What kind of music? Maybe get that music on your way to the person and be like, okay, you know what? Before we start, we're just going to listen to some songs. Let's just chat. Let's listen to this music. And you would find that over time, the person begins to want to engage with you. Research has also shown, a lot of research, that even outside of this acute phase, and acute is within the first week, like first from the time it starts to about 3 months, even if they don't engage in any form of rehabilitation outside of the acute phase, when we compared people that engaged, like did therapy that involved music versus those that didn't, the group that had music incorporated in their therapy outperformed those who didn't, even though they both had the same type of physio. Now, how can music be incorporated? Some, depending on the type of music therapy that you are doing, it could be music making. So some type of therapy involve actual music making, like using the drums, so that you can use your hands that is weak, because ordinarily after a stroke people don't like to. The patients would have to. Yeah, so now they are forced to use that hand. And the more you use the part that is affected, the more you're retraining the brain, the other parts of the brain, to take over the actions of the injured side. So the action of using the parts, the beating the drum, definitely also exercises the muscle, because once you're not using that side, something called wastage. So the muscles begin to waste, because you use what's this word? Use it or lose it. So if you're not using it, you begin to lose the muscles, and we don't want that in rehab. We really don't want that. And so we would encourage like music making, which is drum, piano, because also finger movements are very important, can easily retrain that, in addition to the pleasant sound that you get, the feedback. Another way music has been used is music listening. And I tend to use a lot of music listening examples because my research is music listening, not making. So we have to separate those two. And music listening, especially when walking, has been shown to improve a lot of movement kinematics. So I'm in the kinesiology faculty. So we look at, we analyze movements a lot. So how is your step? How are you stepping? Versus like versus someone who's healthy. Okay, we've looked at how healthy people work. People who have stroke, we see the way they walk. It's absolutely not ideal. And then when there is music, we see that the stepping changes and becomes closer to people who do not have stroke. Same thing with the hands. We'll tell you, okay, reach to this thing, pick this cup and go back. Without music, we can see the movement, it's completely not ideal. But when there's music, you can see that smoothing in that movement, and it's going towards the unaffected, like people who aren't affected. So we can see like just having music there, nothing special is added. The movement strategies are different. And so if this is what we're seeing in a research level, why aren't we incorporating this into clinical research, like clinical experiences, like in basic physio clinics and all of that? And that's the goal, is okay, we're seeing this already in the lab. How can we further make this, into a therapy that we can introduce to the clinical world and say, listen, yes, maybe you don't know how to use the music, but if you have this kind of music with this kind of wavelength, this kind of this or that, maybe you might be able to get more out of this patient.
Exactly.
And they can also engage, which is another thing. They can also engage with the therapy longer, because we also realize that you need to engage. Just doing this 10 times will not be enough to retrain your brain. You need to do it over and over, and it could be very repetitive and annoying or strenuous. But with music, you can probably do more. If before you were doing 10, if you're listening to music, you can maybe do 20. And
excuse me, does it have to be the music that the patient loves?
yes.
Okay, so there is this discussion on what kind of music do you love, or maybe finding out from family members and all of those things.
Exactly.
So those changes that you guys notice, probably the patient is trying to respond to that music. For example, a normal human being, if I hear a music that I love, there's this tendency that I will try to respond to it. So they too also try to respond. And that begins to bring them closer to normality.
Exactly. You have said it in a very layman term, which is wonderful, which is what I've been trying to communicate. But that's exactly how we're looking at it. And it's been shown to work. Not in all cases, but in majority of cases, it does work.
So it's called music listening.
Yes. Music overall, it's called music therapy, but there are also like specific names for different types of music therapy. So the music making therapy has a specific. I don't want to get into the specific titles for each of those therapies, but overall, it's all covered under the music therapy literature. Yeah,
because from what I learned, there's that creation part, which is where you beat the drum, and then the listening part, which is very, very interesting, because some patients may not be able to start, using their hands at that early stage.
And another good thing is we know that there's something called music entrainment, and basically that is, and they've looked at brains by scan. Like, for example, if we start playing a song that you like, for example, as well, and you're serious, like you're trying to avoid or not listen to it, but you're hearing it, and we scan your brain, we would see that the parts that engage movement will light up in the brain. Like you're trying to not move, but your brain is moving already. And so it's the same thing. Like, even though this person cannot move, we can start lighting up those parts of the brain. Like, listen, yes, they're in bed, they're paralyzed currently, but the other parts of the brain can still be working. They can be moving, even though they are not physically moving. So that's also something we want to encourage, engaging more of the brain cells, because it's very important after a stroke. You don't want the brain to just remain dormant. If not, more cells will die. So you want it to keep being active, even though they are not physically doing anything. So that's also a very interesting aspect of the music literature, listening literature, that was popularized by a professor that is currently at UofT. So it's wonderful.
Interesting. When it comes to this topic, I think I can go on and on and on and on for the rest of the day, because my late mom had a stroke. She suffered stroke for a couple of years and all of those things. So it's a topic that I'm so much interested in, and this is really, really there are a lot I've learned today, I must say. As we wrap up this podcast today, we usually have a game that we play, and I'm sure you're ready for the game, right?
I hope so.
Okay, so I'm gonna just walk you through the rule of the game. So we'll have these 3 cups here. So each of these contains a question in it. Okay. And then we have a ball. Oh. So I'm gonna give you this ball. Then you're gonna roll the ball. Whichever cup you hit, then
that's the question.
Exactly, you're gonna get. Are you ready?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Excellent.
All right. Am I aiming inside or just hit?
No, just hit the ball.
Oh, okay. A very random practice. Okay.
Interesting. So you got it at first.
Yeah.
So this is the question you chose. So I'm going to take these ones out. Okay. So, the question here is, who is your role model?
Well, other than my mom, obviously, I do admire Michelle Obama a lot. I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So the next question is, what's the next stage in your career?
Once I'm done with my PhD, hopefully very soon, I hope to be able to continue in the research space. So maybe work with a research institute or go back to clinical practice and implement some of the things that I've learned over the years of doing research into clinical practice.
Okay. The next question is, what's your favorite Canadian food?
Poutine. That's
Interesting.
easy.
Okay. What's your favorite Nigerian food?
Egusi soup. And doesn't matter the swallow. So far as egusi is okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're not traveling to Nigeria or you're not in Canada, which country would you like to visit?
Recently, I've been looking at Brazil. Why? I don't know. I just kind of like their culture. I do have Brazilian friends too. So that's somewhere I would like to visit someday.
Interesting. Okay. So if Anthonia is not studying, researching, what else do you do?
I do have a social media platform that I make content on. So if I'm not doing my work by studying, I am making content for my social media platforms.
Okay. Do you
Called
want to?
Considering Canada on TikTok and on Instagram. So considering_Canada.
Okay. So you can check her up on that. Okay. The last question. If there is one thing you would want to change in this world, what would that be?
There's so many things. But one thing I really, really would is access to education. I think everybody should be able to access education fairly easily and very in a cheap manner too. But that's something that's dear to my heart, and that's why the Considering Canada platform also exists. So,
on this note, I want to thank you very much for making our time to be here. We really appreciate. And we've touched on so many topics, and I think we will have another time where we can connect again and delve more into so many topics that we've touched.
it was
Thank you very
wonderful
much.
being here too. Thank you.